I still remember the exact moment everything shifted. It was a Wednesday afternoon quiet, except for the soft hum of the server room I used to protect like my second home. I was halfway through my coffee when my calendar pinged meeting with Director Reeves, Conference Room B. No context, no agenda, just a location. At 56, I'd seen enough to know what silence often means. My name is Marcus Dell. For the past 17 years, I was the Senior Systems Administrator at Bayview Regional Hospital in Fairhaven, Oregon. I wasn't just keeping machines running, I was keeping lives moving. But in a matter of 22 minutes, I was no longer needed. The new director, Nolan Reeves, sat at what used to be Dr. Lionel Tran's desk, the kind of desk that once stood for wisdom and legacy. Now it was cluttered with modern buzzwords and a man with no medical background but a gleaming MBA. Next to him stood Trevor Lynn, a consultant from Helix Solutions, thumbs dancing across his phone like this meeting was an inconvenience. "We're modernizing the infrastructure," Nolan said, without even looking at me. "Transitioning to a cloud-based system. Helix will oversee the migration." I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I understood what was happening. "Severance package includes 2 months' salary," he added. "Standard NDA. HR will guide the offboarding process." I set my ID badge on the table. "The master credentials are secured in the drive. Full documentation is already stored on the encrypted server." Trevor looked up briefly, probably the first time he acknowledged I existed. "Glad you're being reasonable," Nolan said. "Change is hard but necessary." What he meant was, your usefulness has expired. He didn't ask about the patch I wrote in 2017 that prevented a cascading crash between the prescription and allergy database. He didn't care about the protocol I built from scratch after the 2019 ransomware scare, or how I personally rewired our disaster recovery flow during the 2021 power grid failure. 17 years of flawless uptime, gone with a memo. But it wasn't just a job I was losing. Bayview wasn't a workplace. It was where I built something real after life had stripped me bare. After Eliza, my wife, was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, everything changed. We'd depleted our savings on treatments and out-of-network specialists. My private sector tech job didn't come with compassion. Bayview offered stability, insurance, purpose. I never expected to fall in love with the place, but I did. I learned the language of medicine, not as a doctor, but as someone translating between life-saving systems. I'd spend nights rewriting back-end code so nurses wouldn't have to click through 6 screens just to check dosage history. I missed birthdays. Vacations. I once slept on the server room floor during a system migration because I didn't want to risk downtime during an ICU shift change. I never complained. When my daughter graduated from college, I watched via live stream while troubleshooting a failed update to the imaging server. Eliza understood. She used to say, "You're not just fixing code, Marcus. You're keeping people alive." She was gone by the time Nolan came, and in his eyes, I was just another relic, one more system to replace. They didn't want my knowledge. They wanted my absence. As I packed up my few things, a coffee mug from my first year, a framed photo of my team during the flu crisis of 2015, I walked past faces that used to light up when I entered the room. Some avoided eye contact, some looked guilty, but no one stopped me. Except for Nurse Lila from oncology. She handed me a warm cup of coffee. "You always showed up, Marcus, even when no one else did." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded and left. The fall was silent, but the impact was coming. The next 2 days were surreal. My phone didn't stop buzzing. IT staff, nurses, even Dr. Joe from cardiology. Messages like, "Where's the backup access for the surgery scheduler? Do you remember the override for the allergy module? Is the imaging server supposed to auto-reboot every 48 hours? I didn't answer. The NDA was clear. No unauthorized assistance. No freelance consulting. Not even friendly advice. So I stared at the screen. Messages piling up. Voices I used to help now drowning without me. But I stayed silent. Not out of vengeance, but out of understanding. Because they hadn't just removed me. They had no idea what they'd just destroyed. The system wasn't made of software. It was made of sacrifice. You can't just swap out 17 years of customized care cross-platform bridges and error-proof overrides. You can't replace judgment learned at 3 a.m. when a nurse panics because the order entry system hiccups during a trauma call. Everything I built, every fail-safe, every workaround was there for a reason. Helix could install their sleek dashboards and glossy interfaces, but they didn't understand that hospitals don't run on code, they run on trust. At night, I sat by the fireplace, staring at the glow of the logs. My daughter called. "You okay, Dad?" "Just tired," I said, "but free." I wasn't lying. For the first time in years, I had nothing to fix. No pages, no alerts, no blinking red icons needing attention. And yet, I felt hollow. Not because I was gone from Bayview, but because they didn't even ask me to stay. 1 week later, the cracks began to show. Emergency patients were being diverted. Medication records were missing. Internal systems failed during a night shift, forcing nurses to scribble on paper. Trevor Lynn issued a statement. "Temporary instability is part of any transition." I almost laughed, because for 17 years, instability was my enemy, and I never lost a battle. It started with a voicemail from someone I didn't expect. Dr. Amelia Jo, head of cardiology, level-headed, brilliant. The kind of doctor who didn't panic, even when patients coded mid-sentence. Her voice shook. "Marcus, I'm sorry to call your personal line, but something happened. The ED lost access to patient records during a trauma intake. 42 minutes. We couldn't retrieve allergy history. The patient made it, but barely." I listened to it twice. Not because I didn't understand what she said, but because I did. That pause in her voice. That's what it sounds like when the system you trusted, the one I once held together with midnight patches and custom bridges, suddenly fails. I didn't return the call. Not yet. By now the texts were flooding in. Nurses, admins, IT staff I trained from scratch. They weren't angry. They were afraid. "Did you disable the legacy pharmacy patch before leaving? The appointment scheduler's not syncing any ideas. Our radiology system just froze during a live scan. Is this related to the migration?" I poured another cup of coffee and deleted the messages. It wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. You don't walk into a burning building just because they finally noticed they shouldn't have fired the firefighter. The house was collapsing, and I had left the keys on the table. Everything at Bayview was connected, not just wires and databases, decisions, dependencies, logic chains. Our systems interfaced with 19 different vendor platforms, each speaking a slightly different language. I had spent years building the bridges, writing patch notes that weren't in manuals, creating manual override protocols when automation failed. Those things didn't live in flowcharts. They lived in me, but Nolan didn't see that. He saw old school, he saw slow, he saw replaceable. So he did what all short-sighted leaders do. He replaced experience with software. Then came the second call, not from a colleague, from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Priya Menon, Director of Technology at Westlake General, a hospital with a clean track record, a modern team, and a healthy respect for legacy knowledge. She had tried to recruit me 3 times over the last decade. Each time I told her no, Bayview was my home. But this time, I let the phone ring twice before answering. "Marcus, I saw the headlines. Internal system failure, ED diversion. You doing okay?" I paused. "I'm okay," I said, just watching the fire from a safe distance. She chuckled, but it faded quickly. "I wasn't just calling to check on you," she said. "I've got a spot open, Chief Technology Officer. No bureaucracy, no board politics, just a team that listens." I leaned back. "Are you offering me a job?" "Priya, I'm offering you a chance to build something and be respected for it." I didn't answer right away, but I didn't say no. Meanwhile, Bayview spiraled. 3 departments reported critical system downtime. Helix consultants began requesting emergency paper backups. Nurses scrambled to find allergy histories using fax requests to neighboring hospitals. Billing systems failed. Insurance claims got bounced. Compliance violations were filed. Then came the moment I knew they were truly desperate. Nolan Reeves himself called me. Not his assistant, not HR. Him. I didn't pick up, but I listened to the message. "Marcus, Bukas. Look, I know things didn't end the way they should have, but we're hitting some unexpected issues with integration. Would you be open to a short consultation just to walk the team through some of the structures?" I closed my eyes and deleted the voicemail. The final straw wasn't a crash. It was a quiet insult. 2 days later, Trevor Lynn, the Helix consultant, who never once spoke to me during his evaluation, posted a celebratory update on LinkedIn. Successfully led digital transformation at Bayview Regional. Full cloud migration initiated. Legacy systems decommissioned. Seamless transition underway. Seamless. I read that post while sipping my coffee, knowing full well that 3 floors of Bayview were running on emergency paper protocols, and nurses were handwriting patient notes like it was 1985. Seamless, my ass. That's when I knew something for certain. They didn't just let me go. They tried to erase me. Then the call came that cut deeper than any firing ever could. Dr. Joe again. But this time her voice was tight, controlled. Marcus, I probably shouldn't be calling, but I thought you should know. Nolan's been asking everyone if they have your personal contact info. Things are worse than the board realizes. We had to cancel 2 surgeries yesterday because the patient databases didn't update. And today, the entire oncology suite lost access to treatment protocols. For 6 hours. I didn't speak. She did. They're talking about rolling back to paper. Trevor's team is overwhelmed. They weren't prepared for how interconnected everything is. And frankly, I think Nolan is panicking. Still, I said nothing. Not because I was angry, but because I knew finally they were feeling the weight of every ignored warning, every brushed-aside recommendation. I thought about the secure backup server hidden behind the supply closet wall, about the physical documents in the locked cabinet, about the authentication protocols that would begin expiring in 9 days without manual renewal, about the fact that no one left on that team knew how to renew them. And still, I didn't call. I didn't write. I didn't respond. I just stared out the window of my quiet house with nothing but the soft hum of my own backup drives to keep me company. Then that night I said yes. I called Priya. Told her I was in. She didn't ask for a start date. She just said, "Welcome to Westlake." For the first time in weeks, I breathed in and didn't feel like I was choking on my past. It was 7:12 a.m. when the email came in. Subject, invitation to board emergency meeting, tomorrow morning. From Dr. Lionel Tran, a name I hadn't heard in months. He was once the only board member who truly understood what my department did. A rare blend of surgeon and systems thinker. When he retired, the hospital shifted, and not for the better. But now he was back. Marcus, I know you have no obligation, but many of us would deeply appreciate your insight. Things have reached a critical point. We need the truth. Lionel. I didn't answer right away. Not because I was uncertain, but because I knew the weight of what this would mean. This wasn't a call for help. It was an acknowledgement. They were finally ready to listen. The hospital looked different in the morning fog. As I stepped through the front doors of Bayview Regional Hospital, badgeless, titleless, but not powerless, the air felt heavier, staff whispered. Some stopped mid-step. One nurse, Lila from oncology, placed a hand on my shoulder as I passed. About damn time, she whispered. They need to hear this. The boardroom was already half full. Doctors, admins, department heads, faces I'd worked beside for nearly 2 decades. At the head of the table sat Dr. Tran, calm, collected. Next to him, Nolan Reeves, noticeably pale, flipping through papers he wasn't reading, and trailing behind a very uncomfortable Trevor Lynn Helix Solutions badge, hanging like dead weight around his neck. I took my seat, laptop in hand. No flash drive, no notes. Everything I needed was already in my head and heart. Dr. Tran opened the meeting with quiet authority. We are here today to assess the ongoing system failures following our infrastructure overhaul, and to reevaluate our engagement with Helix Solutions. He looked to me. Mr. Dell has agreed to speak, Marcus. I stood slowly. My voice was steady. I worked at Bayview for 17 years, not just maintaining systems, but building them from scratch, not for speed, not for aesthetics, but for reliability. I clicked my laptop. A simple dashboard appeared on the screen behind me. Uptime logs, patch records, protocol chains, manual overrides, redundant backups, emergency workflows, all documented, all maintained, all neglected. Everything you needed was already here, I said, but no one asked where it lived. I clicked again. A detailed system diagram lit up connections between radiology, pharmacy, cardiology, and admissions. Each line represented custom-built code that Trevor's team had missed. Your consultants, I said without malice, failed to ask a single question about these interdependencies. Trevor cleared his throat. We were given full documentation. Yes, I interrupted, but documentation doesn't substitute understanding. You had the blueprints, but you never walked the halls. Then came the comparison chart, slide 3. Helix deployments versus Bayview's architecture. 19 hospitals, 18 were new builds or post-2020 facilities. Only one retrofitted a legacy hospital, and it failed, documented in a 2021 case study. They were never a fit for us, I said plainly, and they knew that. Dr. Tran leaned forward. Nolan, were you aware of this? Nolan shuffled. The performance reports suggested a seamless transition. I clicked again. This time I showed the internal memo from 3 months ago. An anonymous tip forwarded it to me after my dismissal. A directive from Nolan's office instructing department heads to emphasize instability in existing systems to justify modernization. Dr. Zhou gasped audibly. You lied to the board, Dr. Tran said. It wasn't loud, but it hit harder than a shout. You manipulated compliance metrics, rewrote system assessments, and ignored risk protocols. Nolan stood. I did what I believed was best for long-term. I raised my hand calm. No, you did what was best for short-term gain. I clicked one final time. A slide titled, The Cost of Ignoring Experience. Seoul. 82. Emergency patients diverted. 2 canceled surgeries. 15% increase in medication errors. 4 compliance violations. Public trust eroded. The board voted. 20 minutes later, it was over. Helix Solutions contract terminated. Migration halted. Emergency recovery plan enacted. Trevor Lynn escorted out. Nolan Reeves placed on leave pending review. As I packed up my laptop, Dr. Tran approached. Marcus, he said, we'd like to offer you something, if you're willing. I didn't have to ask. I already knew what was coming. 3 weeks later, I returned to Bayview, under a new title, Marcus Dell, Chief Technology Officer. Not a technician, not a backup plan, a leader. The damage Helix left behind was deep. Critical backups were misaligned. Database clusters were corrupted. 2 vendor contracts had been breached due to unapproved integrations. But my new team, a blend of my old crew and young engineers from Westlake, got to work. Around the clock, we rebuilt, restored, reconnected. We didn't just fix what was broken. We strengthened what mattered. I re-implemented safeguards, restored legacy overrides, and drafted a 5-year roadmap focused on modular modernization, not reckless overhauls. We weren't going to make the same mistake twice. We weren't going to sacrifice people for the illusion of progress. 3 weeks. That's how long it took for me to step back into Bayview Regional Hospital as its new CTO. Not as the silent guardian in the back server room, not as the guy you only called when things broke. This time I walked in through the front doors, head held high. New badge, new title, same mission. But coming back didn't feel like coming home. The building was the same. The corridors, the monitors, even the scent of antiseptic mixed with cheap cafeteria coffee. But something was different. Maybe it was me. Or maybe it was the way people looked at me now, not just with familiarity, but with respect. And sometimes with guilt. I didn't blame them. Not really. People don't fight for what they don't understand. And for years, I worked so hard to keep everything seamless that no one ever saw what held it together. That was on me too. The systems were in shambles. Helix had scrambled the authentication chains. Departments were working in isolation. Billing had lost 2 weeks of insurance verifications. The imaging servers were still offline, but my new team was strong. Samira, a junior from Westlake Sharp, fast, fearless with code. Elias, one of my old engineers back with a renewed fire. And Naya, a former Helix tech who'd jumped ship once she saw the cracks. Together we rebuilt. Not fast, but right. Every day, the hospital came back to life one connection at a time. I walked the halls again, but not as a shadow. I stopped by oncology, where Nurse Lila grinned when the treatment schedules finally synced. 2 seconds, she said, tapping the screen. That's how fast the records load now. I nodded. That's how fast they should have always loaded. In cardiology, Dr. Zhou met me with her arms crossed and a smirk. Didn't think I'd ever see you back in here, she said. Didn't think I'd want to come back, I replied. We stood in silence for a moment, not awkward, just real. You saved us, she finally said. Again. I shook my head. No, you all saved yourselves. You just needed the right tools. And then there was the board meeting, my first quarterly review as CTO. Dr. Tran sat at the head of the table. This time I was at his right. I plugged in my laptop. The screen filled with performance metrics. 99.97% system uptime. 34% increase in scheduling efficiency. 22% faster access to patient records. 0 data loss during restoration. Then I brought up the 5-year roadmap. A modular transition plan, carefully phased updates, staff training embedded into every stage, no blind overhauls, no buzzword-based decisions. Just smart evolution. Real modernization. I said doesn't erase what works. It builds on it. The room was quiet. Then the applause started. Small at first, then stronger. Not for show. Not for politics. Just earned. But success has a shadow. That night I was sitting on my porch, a mug of tea in hand, laptop closed for once. Just breathing. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number, no voicemail. Then again, and again. 15 times over the next 3 days. Finally an email. Subject line urgent, please read, Nolan. The message was desperate and familiar. Marcus, I need to talk. Things have not gone well. Helix is pursuing legal action over the terminated contract. The board is distancing themselves from the decisions. My professional reputation, well, it's not good. I understand now what I didn't before. You were never the problem. I was. If there's any guidance you can offer, even informal, I'd be grateful. I stared at the screen. Not with anger, not even with satisfaction. Just a strange, hollow calm. Because I remembered what it felt like to be dismissed. To sit in that conference room and have my years of work labeled obsolete. To hand over my badge while a man like Nolan looked past me, smiling about a future he didn't even understand. So no, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady, resolved. I hit reply, typed 5 words. There's nothing more to say. Then I hit delete. Closure doesn't always come with an apology. Sometimes it comes with knowing you no longer need one. I kept the message, though, not as a trophy, but as a reminder that when you build with care, when you stand on integrity, the weight of your absence is heavier than any argument. That sometimes the loudest I told you so is silence. A week later, Dr. Tran stopped by my office. He sat down without a word, pulled out a folder. Just so you know, he said, the board has made some final decisions. Nolan had resigned, quietly. No press release, no farewell lunch. Trevor Lynn had disappeared from LinkedIn. Helix was no longer in our vendor system. Clean slate, I said. Clean start, Tran replied. Then he handed me a second folder. Inside a formal legacy had been refortified. Departments no longer working. The silence wasn't threatening anymore. It was earned. One afternoon, Nurse Lila passed me in the hallway. Feels like the hospital exhaled, she said. I smiled. That's the goal. She stopped. You know, when you left the first time it felt like the lights dimmed. And now they're back on. That stayed with me for days. Because sometimes you don't know how visible you were until you're gone. Then came the staff appreciation dinner. I almost didn't go. I've never been one for ceremonies. But my team insisted. So I showed up, quietly, unassumingly, sat at a table near the back with Elias and Samira watching the slideshow loop across the projector screen. Smiling faces, late-night troubleshooting photos, even a snapshot of me asleep at my desk during the week-long recovery sprint. Then came the last slide. To the man who didn't let us fall apart. The room clapped. No speech, no spotlight. Just a slow standing ovation. I didn't cry, but I did close my eyes. And in that silence, I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. Later that night, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Priya Menon at Westlake. Saw the article in the regional journal. You and your team crushed it. Congrats on the Health Tech Excellence Award. I'd say, wish you were here, but you were always meant to be there. P. I looked down at the plaque, sitting quietly on the bookshelf. Northwest Regional Excellence in Healthcare Technology. Bayview Regional Hospital. For years, I never imagined anything like that would carry my name. I scrolled through my photo roll. There it was. My team, old and new, standing beneath the restored server racks, arms around each other. Behind them, a whiteboard scrawled with recovery flowcharts and sticky notes that read, "Don't fix it fast. Fix it forever. No more heroes. Just systems that work. Ask Marcus before touching this port." I laughed out loud at that last one. Some habits don't die easily. A week later, I cleared out my garage, not because I was leaving, but because it was time. I found an old box, the one I carried out on the day I was fired. Inside, the chipped coffee mug from year 1. A folder labeled Downtime Protocols. Marcus only. A photo of Eliza taped to the back of a sticky note that read, "You're keeping people alive." I sat on the garage floor. Let it all wash over me. Eliza never saw this version of me. She saw the struggle, the late nights, the silence that followed me home. But not this. Not the restoration. Not the recognition. Not the healing. But somehow, I felt like she knew. That evening, I walked to the hospital one more time, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. The halls were quiet, not dark, not chaotic, just calm. In radiology, a technician was laughing over something on her monitor. In pediatrics, a nurse hummed while updating records. I stood by the server room door, hand resting on the metal. Elias walked by. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, just remembering how it used to hum when the drives were overheating. He grinned. "They haven't done that in weeks." "Good," I said. "That means you're doing it right." He paused. "Marcus, thanks for all of it." I nodded. "You're welcome. Take care of her." He raised an eyebrow. "The hospital," I clarified. The next morning, I sat on my back deck, coffee in hand. No alerts, no emails, no requests. Just the sky stretching out over Fairhaven, Oregon. And the quiet understanding that this wasn't the end. Just a new version of life. You see, this was never about revenge. I didn't come back to prove Nolan wrong. I didn't return to show them what they lost. I came back because something needed saving. And it wasn't the code. It was the culture. It was the soul of the place. Because experience doesn't expire. And loyalty isn't outdated. And some systems don't need replacing. They just need to be respected. I thought of something Dr. Tran said to me during that first board meeting after I returned. They stripped away your title, but they couldn't touch your impact. And now I know this. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is stay quiet long enough for people to hear the echo of what you once held up. And then come back and rebuild it better. Not for applause, not for credit, but because that's what builders do.